live in a world that celebrates hustle, that glorifies results, that claps loudest for the people who seem to achieve the most, fastest. But here's the truth nobody wants to talk about. Before any great achievement, there is a battle. And that battle doesn't happen on the outside. It happens in the mind. The real work, the foundational work, starts long before anyone sees the result. It begins in a place most people overlook. Discipline of thought. Discipline your mind. It sounds simple, but it's not easy. Because your mind isn't neutral. It's a battlefield of competing voices. Fear, doubt, ego, insecurity, distraction. The mind is designed to protect, to survive, to avoid pain. Which means left unchecked, it will always take the path of least resistance. But that path doesn't lead to purpose. It doesn't lead to greatness. It leads to comfort. And comfort is the enemy of growth. Disciplining your mind doesn't mean silencing fear. It means refusing to be ruled by it. It means recognizing the stories you tell yourself and having the courage to challenge them. It means noticing when your thoughts are spiraling into negativity and choosing to redirect them toward truth. It's not positive thinking, it's powerful thinking. Thinking grounded in clarity, not chaos. In vision, not reaction. Every meaningful life begins with intentional thought. The ability to focus when everything else is fighting for your attention. The strength to say no to the urgent so you can stay focused on the important. The wisdom to pause and ask, is this thought helping me or hurting me? Most people never ask that question. Most people assume their thoughts are facts. But thoughts are not facts. They're patterns. And patterns can be reshaped. We train our bodies because we want to be strong. We practice skills because we want to be excellent. But how often do we train our thinking? How often do we take responsibility for what we allow to live in our minds? That inner world, that space between stimulus and response, it's everything. Because no matter what happens around you, the one thing you will always control is how you interpret it. And your interpretation shapes your behavior. Your behavior shapes your results. It all starts with the mind. Mental discipline is about consistency, about showing up for yourself even when you don't feel like it. It's waking up and choosing to think on purpose. To lead your thoughts instead of being led by them. It's catching yourself when you drift into excuses and asking, what does responsibility look like right now? It's reminding yourself that your mind is a tool, not a master. It works for you, you don't work for it. But this kind of discipline doesn't happen overnight. It's built in the quiet moments when no one is watching. And no one is clapping. When you choose to stay the course, not because it's easy, but because it's right. It's built when you choose to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it. When you choose to learn instead of complain. When you decide that self-respect matters more than short-term relief. Most people wait for motivation to show up before they act. Disciplined minds act first and let motivation follow. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't wait until they feel ready. They understand that readiness is a byproduct of action, that clarity comes from doing, not overthinking. So they build the habit of doing hard things, of leaning into resistance, of stepping toward fear, not because they're fearless, but because they've trained themselves to think beyond it. There's a voice in your head that says, play small. Stay safe, don't risk it. That voice is not your enemy. It's just not your guide. It's a signal that you're doing something that matters, something that stretches you, And the disciplined mind learns to interpret that signal as a green light, not a red one. It uses fear as fuel, not as a wall. Discipline also means being intentional with what you feed your mind, what you read, what you watch, who you listen to. Every piece of input is a seed, and over time, those seeds become your beliefs, and your beliefs become your outcomes. So if you want to elevate your life, elevate your thinking. Surround yourself with ideas that challenge you, people who stretch you, voices that lift you out of mediocrity and into meaning. It's easy to scroll, easy to react, easy to stay busy without being intentional. But there's a cost to that kind of passivity. It keeps your mind cluttered, distracted, anxious. And a cluttered mind cannot create clarity. It cannot lead with purpose. It cannot build anything sustainable. Discipline clears the space. It slows things down. It helps you choose what matters most and let go of the rest. And here's the beautiful part. When you discipline your mind, you liberate your life. You stop living at the mercy of circumstance. You stop outsourcing your confidence to achievement. You stop waiting for life to hand you peace, and you start creating it from within. You become the kind of person who doesn't just chase success, you build it, brick by brick, thought by thought, with quiet resolve. Every great leader, every great thinker, every person who has changed the world, they started by mastering their internal world. They learned to think clearly when others were panicking, to stay grounded when others were reactive, to hold vision when others saw only chaos. And that capacity didn't come from talent, it came from discipline, from the daily decision to lead themselves before they tried to lead anything else. So if you want to change your life, change your thinking. If you want to be powerful, master your patterns. And if you want to live with purpose, start by taking full ownership of your mind. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Because the disciplined mind is not just a strong mind, it's a free one. And freedom, real freedom, always begins in the way you think. Most people go through life assuming that what they think is automatically true. That their internal dialogue is a reflection of reality, not just a reaction to it. But this belief is not only limiting, it's dangerous. Because when you confuse your thoughts with truth, you hand over control of your decisions, emotions, and direction to patterns you may not even be aware of. Thoughts are not facts. They're experiences, responses, echoes of past conditioning. And like any pattern, they can be interrupted, challenged, and reshaped with intention. Imagine walking into a room with cracked windows. If you've never seen a room with clean glass, you'll assume those cracks are just how windows are. You'll live with them, look through them, and even adjust your behavior around them. The same thing happens in the mind. We inherit beliefs, develop habits of thinking, form assumptions based on fear, trauma, or even cultural pressure. Over time, we stop questioning them. They just feel true. But the truth is that most of what we think, especially the thoughts that hold us back, isn't rooted in clarity, it's rooted in repetition. If you tell yourself something often enough, your brain starts to believe it. That's how neural pathways work. The more you think a thought, the easier it is to think again. This is great if the thought is helpful. I am capable of learning. I can do hard things. I'm not defined by my mistakes. But most of the time, the thoughts that repeat are the ones we've never taken the time to investigate. I'll never be good enough. I'm always behind. Nothing ever works out for me. These statements don't come from wisdom. they come from wounds. Disciplining your mind starts with awareness, not judgment. Awareness. You can't change what you don't notice. So you begin by paying attention to what your mind says when you're tired, when you fail, when you feel insecure, when someone criticizes you, when life feels unfair. Those are the moments when your default thoughts speak the loudest. And it's in those moments that you have a choice. You can obey those thoughts blindly, or you can pause and question them. Where did that belief come from? Is it helping me or hurting me? Is it true or just familiar? Most of us never ask these questions. We don't challenge the voice in our head that says we're not good enough or that we should give up. We take it at face value, not realizing that it's simply a habit. An untrained mind is like an untrained muscle. It does what it's always done. It takes the easiest route. It resists discomfort. It leans toward fear. But just like a muscle, it can be trained. And that training begins with interrupting the pattern. When a negative thought arises, notice it. Don't react immediately, just observe. Give it a name. There's that old fear of failure again. Or there's that belief that I'm behind. This act alone puts distance between you and the thought. It reminds you that your thoughts are not who you are. They're just passing clouds in the sky of your awareness. The disciplined mind doesn't suppress those clouds, but it doesn't build a life around them either. It watches them come. It lets them pass. And it anchors itself in something deeper. That deeper anchor is intentional thought. Thought chosen on purpose. Thought that reflects not just where you've been, but where you want to go. Rewiring the mind doesn't mean eliminating every negative thought. That's impossible. It means refusing to give them power. It means replacing automatic reactions with deliberate responses. If the old thought says, I can't do this, the disciplined mind replies, what's one small thing I can do right now? If the old thought says, I've always failed, the disciplined mind says, that was then, this is now. This isn't wishful thinking. It's strategic, because your thoughts drive your actions and your actions shape your reality. Every time you choose a new thought, you're creating a new pathway. The more you walk it, the easier it becomes. And over time, those new pathways become your new normal. It's slow, yes, but it's powerful. Because instead of letting your mind drift into fear or comparison or hopelessness, you're teaching it how to come home to truth. Not fantasy, truth. The truth that you're still learning, that you're still growing, that setbacks don't define you, that your worth isn't tied to perfection, that you are not your worst moment. Sometimes your mind will argue with this. It will pull out evidence from the past. It will remind you of your failures, your mistakes, your fears. But even that is a pattern. The disciplined mind sees this not as a threat, but as a signal. A signal that you're stepping out of an old story. And every time you resist the urge to retreat and instead choose to step forward with intention, you're reshaping the story itself. One of the most effective ways to rewire thought patterns is through language. The words you use matter. Instead of saying, I have to, say, I get to. Instead of, I'm terrible at this, say, I'm still learning. Instead of, this is impossible, say, this is new. These shifts may seem small, but over time they build a mindset of possibility instead of paralysis. They create an inner world where effort is celebrated, where progress is visible, where identity is not fixed but fluid and growing. Your thoughts also mirror the environments you immerse yourself in, the people you spend time with, the content you consume, the expectations you absorb. Disciplining your mind means curating these inputs, surrounding yourself with people who speak life, who challenge you to think higher, who model clarity and courage. It means limiting exposure to voices that pull you back into old, limiting narratives. You don't have to absorb everything you hear. You have the right and the responsibility to filter your inputs just as much as you do your outputs. It's not about control. It's about stewardship. Your mind is the engine of your life. Every choice, every relationship, every opportunity, it all flows through the filter of your thoughts. If that filter is clogged with fear, resentment, or shame, you will see life through distortion. But if that filter is cleaned regularly, retrained consistently, and aligned with truth, your life begins to take on a different shape. Not because circumstances change overnight, but because your response to them does. This process doesn't require perfection, it requires repetition. A daily commitment to noticing, questioning, and replacing. To speaking to yourself with the same clarity and compassion you'd give a friend. To reminding yourself that growth isn't linear, that setbacks are part of progress, and that you're not failing when a negative thought shows up. You're succeeding when you choose not to follow it. This is the work of a disciplined mind. Not to eliminate all struggle, but to lead yourself through it with intention. Not to become invincible, but to become unshakable in how you think, choose, and show up in the world. We live in a culture that worships motivation. We scroll through quotes, watch videos, listen to podcasts, waiting for that perfect spark, that jolt of energy that will finally push us into action. But motivation is a feeling, and feelings are fleeting. They rise and fall like waves. If you only move when you're motivated, you'll be waiting forever. Because motivation is inconsistent. It's reactive. It depends on mood, environment, and circumstances. And if you let it be the engine of your actions, you'll always be stuck in the cycle of waiting, planning, and hesitating. The people who create meaningful results in their lives don't rely on motivation, they rely on discipline. They act first. And what often follows, as a consequence, not a cause, is motivation. Action breeds clarity. Action breeds energy. Action turns possibility into progress. When you take the first step, even a small one, you interrupt inertia. You shift from passive thinking into forward movement. The brain starts to build momentum. Doubt gives way to curiosity. Fear gives way to effort. And that effort creates feedback, growth, and a sense of control. Suddenly, the thing that felt impossible becomes manageable. Not because your emotions changed, but because you acted anyway. That's the real shift. Learning to take action regardless of how you feel. This doesn't mean feelings don't matter. It means they're not in charge. Feelings can inform you, but they can't define your choices. You can feel tired and still show up. You can feel uncertain and still take the next step. You can feel overwhelmed and still break the task down and begin. Discipline is doing the right thing even when it doesn't feel good in the moment. It's choosing long-term values over short-term feelings. It's showing up not because you're inspired, but because you're committed. Waiting for motivation puts your growth in someone else's hands. It says, I'll move when I'm moved. But purpose-driven people don't wait to be moved, they move. They make a plan, they schedule their time, they remove distractions, they simplify the goal, and then they start, even if the start is messy, uncertain, or slow. because they understand that the first step is the hardest. Not because it's technically difficult, but because it breaks the pattern of passivity. Think of any meaningful change you've ever made. Did it start with a lightning bolt of inspiration, or did it start with a choice? Maybe a small one, getting out of bed, sending the email, showing up to the meeting, putting the phone down, making a list, saying no. These aren't glamorous moments. They're not viral, but they matter. They're the moments that build trust in yourself. And the more you trust yourself to act, the less dependent you become on needing to feel like it. This mindset is especially important when you're trying to build habits. In the beginning, every habit feels unnatural. It feels awkward. You're rewiring your brain. You're going against years, sometimes decades of unconscious programming. So if you only do it when it's easy or exciting, you'll never get past the resistance. The key is consistency over intensity. It's better to do something small every day than something big once in a while. Because consistency creates rhythm, and rhythm creates reliability. When you act without waiting for motivation, you create a foundation, a routine, a system that supports you when your energy dips. You stop relying on willpower and start relying on structure. Structure is freedom. It eliminates the need to negotiate with yourself every day. Instead of asking, do I feel like doing this? You say, this is what I do. That shift in identity from someone who waits to someone who does is everything. It's the difference between wishing for change and becoming the kind of person who makes change inevitable. It's not about intensity, it's about intention. Doing the work doesn't always mean grinding or burning out. It means being honest about what matters and making it non-negotiable. It means identifying your distractions, your escape routes, the little ways you delay action, and gently but firmly closing those doors. Not because you're being hard on yourself, but because you care enough to lead yourself well. Discipline is self-leadership in action. It says, I won't abandon myself just because it's uncomfortable. Sometimes people confuse discipline with pressure. But true discipline isn't harsh, it's rooted in clarity. You act not out of fear or guilt, but out of alignment with your values. You move forward because you know who. And even when the results are slow, you stay the course because your identity isn't tied to the outcome. It's tied to the process. That shift makes you resilient because you're no longer fragile to circumstance. You've trained yourself to show up anyway. And something else happens when you stop waiting for motivation. Your confidence grows. Not the loud, performative kind of confidence, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing you can count on yourself. That no matter how chaotic things get, you can take the next right step. That's power. Not perfection, not control, just the steady, honest habit of showing up. Over time, that becomes your edge. While others are waiting for the right mood or the right conditions, you're building. And what you build compounds. You don't have to feel ready. You don't have to feel brave. You don't have to feel amazing. You just have to begin. And when you do, you take the first swing at inertia. You reclaim your agency. You prove to yourself that action is always possible, even when it's small, even when it's imperfect, especially when it's inconvenient. Because it's in those moments that the habit is being formed. Not just the habit of doing the task, but the habit of doing it anyway. It's easy to romanticize motivation. To think that the people who do great things are the ones who are always inspired. But that's not the truth. The truth is the most consistent performers aren't waiting to feel like it. They've trained themselves to act regardless. They've learned to tie their actions to purpose, not emotion. They don't rely on hype or mood or even external accountability. They rely on the understanding that action creates movement, that movement creates momentum, and that momentum carries them through the days when motivation is nowhere to be found. This mindset changes how you approach everything: your health, your work, your relationships, your goals. It teaches you to stop overthinking and start executing, to stop romanticizing the idea of readiness and start building the muscle of action. That muscle is what separates intention from implementation. It's what turns dreams into outcomes. And it's available to anyone willing to move forward without waiting to be perfectly inspired. Mental discipline is not something that happens in a loud moment of inspiration. It's not about what you do when the crowd is watching, when you're fired up, or when everything feels aligned. Mental discipline is built quietly, behind the scenes, in the small, often invisible choices you make every single day. It's formed in the seconds you decide to keep going when quitting would be easier. In the pause between stimulus and response, when you choose to reflect instead of react. In the commitment to do what you said you'd do long after the feeling that made you say it has faded. These small decisions may not feel significant in the moment, but they're stacking. They're shaping your identity. And they are the clearest indicators of whether you are training your mind or letting it drift. Most people think discipline is about big, dramatic action. But the truth is, discipline is usually quiet. It happens when the alarm goes off and you choose to get up. When your phone pings with a distraction and you choose to stay focused. When no one is checking on you and you do the work anyway. When you're not in the mood to be kind, but you choose to respond with empathy. These are the moments that define who you are. Not because anyone else sees them, but because you do. Every time you follow through in private, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. Every time you choose consistency over comfort, you're building a kind of strength that can't be faked. Mental discipline is deeply connected to your self-respect. When you make promises to yourself and keep them, your confidence grows. Not because you succeeded at something big, but because you prove to yourself that your word means something. You stop treating your own commitments as negotiable. You stop justifying why today was too hard, too busy, too uncertain. That's not to say you don't give yourself grace. Of course you do. But grace without discipline becomes complacency. And discipline without grace becomes cruelty. It's the balance of both that creates a resilient mind. In a world that's constantly pushing for instant gratification, mental discipline is a rebellion. It's the decision to delay pleasure for the sake of something greater. It's the awareness that the easy path rarely leads to meaningful results. It's the patience to choose long-term growth over short-term relief. This is not something that happens on accident. You don't stumble into mental strength. You build it, brick by brick, habit by habit, choice by choice. And you build it in silence, in the spaces where no applause exists, where the only reward is knowing you didn't let yourself down. You become someone strong by doing strong things, especially when no one else knows about them. When you put your phone down and go read instead. When you skip the easy excuse and start the workout. When you choose to journal your frustration instead of projecting it. When you take a breath before responding with anger. These are not grand gestures, they're simple acts of control, of leadership, of owning your role in shaping your own life. And the more you practice them, the more automatic they become. That's how you train your mind, not by reacting perfectly, but by responding intentionally. One of the most powerful aspects of mental discipline is the ability to sit with discomfort, to not need to escape every time you feel stress, boredom, insecurity, or fear. Discomfort is not your enemy, it's your trainer. It's revealing where your edges are, where you haven't yet built capacity, where your instincts lean toward flight instead of focus. If you run every time it gets hard, you're reinforcing fragility. But if you breathe through it, think through it, grow through it, you're reinforcing strength. And that strength will show up in ways you won't even realize until life demands it. Mental discipline also means you don't believe everything you think. You observe your thoughts without being dominated by them. You recognize patterns that don't serve you and choose to challenge them. This takes practice. It's easy to let your mind run the show, but a disciplined mind learns to pause, to question, to not give every thought a microphone. It understands that thoughts are visitors, not commands. And you get to decide which ones get to stay. A huge part of building discipline is setting your environment up to support it. Willpower is limited. Even the most disciplined people don't rely on willpower alone. They use systems. They create structure. They design their days in ways that reduce friction and increase alignment. They put the book by the bed. They delete the app that wastes time. They block the calendar so they can focus. These aren't hacks. They're habits. And habits are how you make discipline sustainable. It's also about clarity. If you don't know what matters most, everything will feel urgent. You'll spend your energy reacting instead of creating. Mental discipline means narrowing your focus, identifying your values, asking what matters right now and what can wait. It's about being selective with your attention. Because attention is the currency of your life. Where you give it determines what you build. A scattered mind produces scattered results. A disciplined mind builds with intention. You will fail at this sometimes. You'll slip. You'll fall back into old patterns. That's not weakness. That's part of the problem. What matters is what you do next. Whether you get up and try again. Whether you forgive yourself without excusing yourself. Whether you reflect instead of shame. That's what turns a moment of failure into a moment of progress. Not by pretending it didn't happen, but by learning from it. Mental discipline means you stop measuring your worth by your perfection and start measuring your growth by your persistence. This kind of mindset doesn't just affect your productivity, it affects your peace. A disciplined mind is not constantly distracted, reactive, or anxious. It doesn't spiral every time something goes wrong. It knows how to center itself, to come back to the present, to take a breath, a break, or a step forward. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about managing attention. Not denying struggle, but responding to it with skill. That skill gets built in daily practice. And the more you practice, the more equipped you are to handle whatever comes your way. The truth is, most of the breakthroughs people talk about, the habits they built, the goals they hit, the clarity they found, didn't come in grand moments of realization. They came through quiet consistency, through the practice of showing up even when they didn't feel like it, through the choice to not be ruled by their feelings, through the small decisions made when no one was watching. That's where mental discipline lives. Not in the noise, but in the silence. Not in the performance, but in the practice. Not in what others see, but in what you choose when it's just you and the mirror.